All right, good evening, everyone. We're just going to give people a few minutes to come in out of the waiting room here, and then we will go ahead and get started. All right, so my name is Katie Auney. I'm the Assistant Dean for External Relations for Philip Merrill College of Journalism. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening to our panel discussion about the future of journalism. Just a couple housekeeping notes before we get going. We are recording this and we will have it on our YouTube channel available tomorrow. We do encourage you to submit questions throughout the evening. You can use the Q&A function to submit questions, and we will try to get to as many of those as possible. We're thrilled to have a great panel with us this evening of Merrill Made alumni. I'm going to put in the chat the link to the registration page that has their bios, but I'm going to first turn it over to Dean Lucy Dalglish, who will get things started. And before I do that, just a note that this is part of the Alumni Association's Alumni Career Week. And so it's just the start of a week of programming geared towards alumni at all stages in their career. I'm going to put that link in the chat as well if you're interested in seeing some of the other programs that are available this week. So without further ado, I will turn things over to Dean Dalglish.
Dean Dalglish is not a broadcaster, so she had to remember to unmute herself. Welcome, everyone. And in case you missed it, we are being recorded tonight. You know, those of you who took media law know Maryland is a two-party state, so you've just been notified that you are being recorded. It's a pleasure to have all of you. We know from looking at the number of folks who have registered for tonight's program, we have quite a few alumni, so welcome back. And we hope that you will be so intrigued with what's going on tonight that you join the conversation. Please hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and I will do my best to use some of your questions. And but I'll probably ask a couple of questions of our panelists first. So let me first introduce our panelists. And in the order in which they are showing up on my screen. The first one is actually our most recent Merrill College graduate, Talia Richmond, who graduated in 2017. Talia, who's originally from Texas, left Merrill College to go to work for the Baltimore Sun, where she was an education reporter. She's now moved on to the Dallas Morning News, but before she did that, while she was still in Baltimore you may have seen some pictures we published of her skipping down the street after she and her colleagues won a Pulitzer last year for their work uncovering a little bit of corruption involving the mayor of Baltimore. So welcome, Talia. Next is Angela Davis from the class of 1990. Angela right now is a host of Minnesota Public Radio's, Angela, is the show in the morning or? It's the morning show?
11 a.m. Central Time,
11 a.m.
Eastern Time.
Yeah, 11 a.m. Central Time. Angela was for many years a reporter and anchor for a couple of television stations in the Twin Cities and also in this region. She's been doing the 11 a.m. program now for a couple of years. As I recall, 2018, 2 years? Yeah, something like that. And you've won 5 regional Emmys for anchoring and covering breaking news. Next is Anika Reed, who graduated from Merrill College in 2016 and just sort of blazed out of here. And you've just been astonishing us every chance you've gotten. Right now, Anika is the editor of Life and Entertainment, I gotta get this right, for trending life, entertainment, and travel news at USA Today. And Anika, you went to USA Today pretty much right out the door of Merrill College, and you have steadily been climbing the ladder there, starting with social media and doing all those hip things, and now you're actually in charge. And you've had an amazing trajectory. We're very, very proud of you. Sean Musenden is going to be very familiar to a lot of the people on this call because you probably had him as a teacher. Sean graduated in 2000 with a master's degree. He's a former Washington correspondent for the Orlando Sentinel. Then he taught in our Capitol News Service for quite a few years, running our digital bureau in Studio C in Knight Hall. But starting last year, Sean took on a new responsibility as the data editor for our new Roy Howard Center for Investigative Journalism. So anything you want to know about data, Sean has either gone to a course somewhere or he has taught himself. He has a master's degree also from our iSchool, has really dived deep into the whole data thing. I'm going to start out the conversation. This is supposed to be a panel discussion about the future of journalism. And to do that, I think we have to look a little bit at the past. But, you know, Anika and Talia, you in particular, came into Knight Hall as freshmen, right at the start of when people were saying, oh, journalism is dead, journalism is dead, journalism is dead. And you've actually been able to demonstrate that it's not. So Talia, can you give us a little bit of an idea of, you know, you worked for the Diamondback, you worked in Baltimore. Tell us about your trajectory once you left Knight Hall.
Yeah, so after graduating from the University of Maryland, I was lucky enough to get a job at the Sun, and I absolutely think that is because of the work that I was able to do and the guidance I was able to get from the professors and my peers at the University of Maryland. Luckily, the college sets you up and helps you get internships along the way. And I think that's really the most valuable part of my education from Maryland, was that everyone was focused on getting us real world experiences. And, you know, when I was looking at what school I wanted to go to, being from Texas, I was looking all over the country and I was just amazed at the kind of work that people from Maryland were doing. And I was thinking, you know, what am I going to be doing my senior year? It's going to be the 2016 election. Sounds like that one could be historic. And I want to be there, like at the inauguration. And I didn't know there was going to be a, you know, huge protest the next day, but I want to be there too. And the fact that you were able to witness history as a student and be treated, you know, just like a regular reporter, I think was so important, especially because, I mean, Anika and I have started our careers at such a fascinating time for the industry. You know, we've never been professional reporters at a time when, you know, the president wasn't saying the media was the enemy of the American people. And I really think, you know, the lessons I learned at Merrill fortified me for that and taught me that that was absolutely not the case. You know, I met truly amazing people there who are so inspiring. So.
Thank you. Angela, you were here and you grew up in the Carolinas, as I recall.
I came to Maryland in the fall of 1986, straight from a tobacco farm in Southern Virginia. So I was a country farm girl who stepped onto campus and yeah, I graduated 30 years ago. And so, you know, for me, Maryland was such a treasure because it was right outside of Washington, D.C. And I think one of the great things about that location is, you know, as Talia mentioned, the opportunities for internships, but also, you know, having professors at Maryland who were working journalists in the district who would come in to talk to us in class. And obviously, again, all those internship opportunities, but the professors there made it very clear to us that if you wanted to work in news, that you needed to be a consumer of news. And so that DC market, you know, covers the district, but it also covers the federal government. It covers the communities in the suburbs of Maryland and Virginia. So there's just, it's an environment that's just rich in news and news coverage. But I was my senior year, I interned at CNN, the Washington, D.C. bureau. And when I graduated, the connections I made there enabled me to start at CNN in Atlanta 3 days after I graduated. So I moved to Atlanta and worked behind the scenes in TV there at CNN for a year. And then I came back to DC and I worked at WUSA Channel 9 for a year as a trainee, working behind the scenes. And then I got my first on-air television reporting job in Lexington, Kentucky. And I was there for 2 years. And then I ended up in Minneapolis in 1994 after that. And I've been here for most of that time. I did leave for 2 years to go work in Dallas at a television station. But, you know, the opportunities I had in the journalism building, and this is before it was the Merrill College. It didn't have that name back then, but it was still on top of things. We still, you know, I was still checking out equipment, tripods and camera equipment, and going out and learning how to shoot and edit video. I was working at WMUC radio, doing as a newscaster, working on my voice, trying to shake that Southern accent. And so Maryland was great in just giving me all those tools that I would need after I started working while I was still a student. And the opportunity, you know, to work at all those newspapers on campus. I wrote for the 2 Black newspapers at the time, the Black Explosion, as well as Eclipse, and then also spent some time writing for the Diamondback. And so everything I wanted and needed was right there on campus, as well as having that DC, you know, media right at my fingertips as well.
Sounds like you probably didn't sleep much.
I didn't. I still haven't.
You still haven't. Yes. Anika, you really were one of our students who embraced a lot of the technology and social media and all of those things while you were here, and then were able to parlay it into a really outstanding job right out the door. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Absolutely. I was, you know, this little Florida girl who didn't know anyone on campus, but knew I wanted to do some kind of journalism. And when I got to Maryland, I was so nervous and so excited. And I'm definitely more of a reserved and shy person. So having to kind of break out of my shell was part of that process. But I feel like Merrill really helped me do that, as well as the work I did on campus, working for Unwind magazine, Stories Beneath the Shell, as well as CNS. I mean, Talia talking about, you know, covering the election. I was able to cover President Obama's 2015 State of the Union address as a student, like in in the Capitol, which was, you know, one of those experiences that you look back on and think, wow, that's kind of amazing. And I mean, speaking of social media, I like live tweeted that as a student, and that was, I think, kind of one of my first instances of kind of meshing social media and reporting and all of that at a stage that was kind of early in the game for that. And I mean, Merrill, there's a very clear line from my time at the journalism school to where I am today. All of my professors were absolutely amazing, and I still love to keep in touch with some of them. One of them in particular, who was an adjunct, Jess Milsatich, she brought in a friend of hers, Emily Yar, who works at the Washington Post, and she brought her into class one day, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. She works in the style section. She covers entertainment. I think that's what I want to do one day. Well, after I graduated, I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I ended up meeting up with Professor Milsatich, and she put me in touch with Emily, who I met up with and talked about pop culture with for like an hour. And she's actually who recommended me to one of my current coworkers for the job that I ended up getting at USA Today. So those connections are honestly crucial to me being in the position that I am right now, and being able to kind of transition from doing social media and covering events and doing all of the things that go along with life and entertainment coverage to now kind of helping shape what that coverage looks like as well. So going from covering the State of the Union to now, you know, this year planning what my team was going to do for the inauguration, things like that really just stand out to me as great moments.
So how do you like being a boss? How do you like how do you feel about the shaping of the agenda?
I mean, I think it's super exciting to be able to work with a team of people who is super passionate about, everyone is so passionate about journalism and accuracy and truth. And also, as I said, I, you know, work in entertainment. So, you know, fellow pop culture nerds like myself who love movies and music and TV and books and all of those amazing things. So I think the team makes it absolutely worth it. They help me feel more creative and help me really figure out, okay, like what is our coverage going to look like and how can we really do it in a way that brings in our audience, hopefully brings in new audiences and gives them, you know, the nuance and the context that they need for a variety of stories, whether it's, you know, a celebrity wedding or, you know, protests in which, you know, there's so much going on. So so yeah, I love it.
Wonderful. Well, speaking of Sean, speaking of social media and tweeting and all of that stuff and teamwork, you are one of the integral members of our team running Capital News Service and the Howard Center for Investigative Journalism. But you started out as a reporter. And can you talk a little bit about what it was that made you go from being a reporter to being truly, I think, the biggest digital geek in the entire building? And I say that fondly and with great respect.
Yeah, so I sort of had a somewhat traditional newspaper reporting path for about 10 years after I graduated from Merrill in 2000. And that, that whole time I was always interested in the application of technology and programming and data to journalism. And that really, for me started when I took a class here at Merrill in, I guess it would have been 1999, with two data journalism pioneers, Sarah Cohen, who also an alum, and Dan Keating. And at the time, they were both at the Post. I knew about journalism. I worked for my undergrad newspaper in college, but I had no idea that, data journalism was a subset that somebody could focus on and really make a key part of their reporting toolkit. And it just blew me away. And, for the 10 years after I left here, I specialized when I was a State House correspondent in Florida and then a Washington correspondent in doing data-driven stories. That is getting interesting data sets and analyzing them to find newsworthy information and build some news stories on top of that. And yeah, when I think about, what I have to thank for those opportunities, for me, it was the college's relentless focus on public affairs reporting and real world reporting opportunities, letting us actually do real journalism in the classroom through Capital News Service, something that continues today. So I now teach that data journalism class here, and every day I get to work with some really amazing, bright students on investigative reporting projects in partnership with NPR and PBS NewsHour and the AP, and it's pretty awesome.
Thanks. Well, Angela, the next question is for you. You and I and Sean are the ones that probably have a pretty good feel for what journalism was like, both for me, it was newspapers, for you, it was television. But what has it been like? What is the most surprising thing to you that you have had to learn how to do, that you do regularly now as a broadcast journalist, that you never would have dreamed you'd be doing in 1990 when you left?
I think when I first started working as a journalist, part of the daily work routine in television, and I was also a newspaper intern. I interned at the Baltimore Sun, is that there was a process. You would get your assignment or you pitch your story assignment, and then you start working on it, right? And then you would do your interviews, and you would do your research, and you would work with your editors or producers, and then you put together a story, and that was the news cycle. And then there'd be a deadline, and then it would be published, or you're on TV with it. And that was, it was sort of an uninterrupted process. And now, because of social media and because of technology, it's this, the news cycle is just, it's maddening. It's by the time you can state what you're thinking might be of interest, it's already out there. And so when I worked in television, one of the big frustrations was that, technology allowed us to have images and sound and be able to share, video of what is happening, within seconds of it happening. But it takes time to be able to get information and facts about what someone is actually seeing and to put it into context. But you know, the requirements of being a journalist now, because of social media and because everyone has, you know, everyone's a photographer, everyone's a journalist, right? Not everyone is a journalist, but everyone sometimes believes they are a journalist because everyone can gather information and share it on a platform, right? We're competing with the public to share stories. And so television journalists now, and even for me in radio, you're throughout the day, you're updating. Okay, I'm in the car, I'm doing a story about you know, schools reopening, and now I'm at a school, here's a picture, I'm about to interview a teacher, here's a quote from what the teacher said. Like, before you can even start writing your story, you're sharing like every little step. You know, I'm on my Facebook Live telling you, you know what we just learned, and tonight at 6, you know, we'll have this, and then, you know, then you jump out the car and then you go get that. So the amount of time we have now to actually write and process and just to do the journalism is, you know, it's much harder because there's this constant sense of immediacy just to get it out there because there's so much more competition. And so I find that, I mean, it is what it is, but that was not how I was trained, not how I spent most of my careers. Like, I had, you know, hours to put together a story and present it. And now it's like every step of it is constantly flowing and shared with everyone. And, you know, sometimes information's not right, sometimes things are not clear. And the process of deciding what do you share and what do you don't share is hard. So that's one of the big differences that I've seen that I think has made working as a journalist harder.
Talia, I'd like you to reflect for a minute, talking about what Angela just said. What are the pros and the cons of that immediacy? I mean, we try to teach you from the day you walk in that you have to be prepared to do all of those things. What do you think is good about that landscape, and what worries you about it?
Yeah, so as Angela was talking, I was just flashing back to various crime scenes I was in Baltimore, where I would be filing copy, you know, on the notes app of my phone, and then copy pasting the whole thing and either texting it or slacking it over to an editor and then immediately seeing it pop up online. So in a lot of ways, I mean, it's great that we are responding to the need for immediacy. Otherwise, people would fill in that gap with speculation and rumors, and, you know, a lie travels much faster than the truth. So I'm glad that we're in that space as quickly as everyone else and making sure that that is covered. But this actually also reminds me of, you know, a talk I was having with one of my colleagues today. We really want to publish a story soon. We're excited about it, but we're waiting to get some really key questions answered. And we just keep talking, you know, if someone else gets the story before us, that'll really suck. And it'll feel like hell for us. But what is a worse hell is a correction and getting it wrong. So just the idea that, you know, we don't want to get beaten, but more than that, we don't want to be wrong. So just always having, you know, that does make us different from the people who are spreading rumors and tweeting without, you know, being a journalist. So that is something I definitely want to always have in mind.
Now, Anika, a lot of people think of entertainment and travel and everything in the life section as being kind of, oh, that's just the fun stuff. But everything you're doing, covering industries that are really a big deal. There's incredible amounts of money involved in entertainment and travel and other lifestyle type issues. Do these issues also pop up in what you're doing at USA Today?
Absolutely. I mean, entertainment, yeah, I think sometimes is very much, you know, lighthearted, and it might not be seen as, you know, something as serious as maybe what's going on with the government or what have you. But I think we're still covering really important issues that do affect the way that our society kind of functions. It's entertainment, but it's culture. It shapes our entire society. So I think, yeah, when you're figuring out if a celebrity is dead or alive, and that's like going to impact people, you want to make sure that that's correct, and you want to make sure that, you know, you have all the relevant information. We've seen, particularly not long after I started at USA Today, the start of the Me Too movement kind of happened, and all of the allegations against Harvey Weinstein and others became a really big talking point, and something that we needed to add context to, and something that we wanted to make sure that we got right, because that affects people. You know, when people are reporting assaults and things that have happened to them that are scary and have frankly been ignored for many years. One person getting that wrong can really do a disservice to survivors of things everywhere. So we always want to make sure that we get things right, but we are in the same, business of getting things out there quickly. I agree with Talia in the sense that there can be a lot of misinformation out there, and we want to make sure that we're combating that with the truth as quickly as we can. And so anything that we can do to A, get it out there quickly, B, I really A, get it out there accurately, B, get it out there quickly, and C, get it out there with as much information, context, and extra oomph that we can. I think that that's all really important and fully plays into what we do in entertainment.
So Sean, I don't imagine the need to get information out there quickly and accurately is going to change. That's here to stay. And we can sometimes do that, report stuff faster than we can think. But I'm going to use you as our futurist. What's the next thing that we're going to have to teach our students so that they're ready to go when they walk out of Knight Hall?
Yeah, so a thing I think a lot about is the increasing intersection between computation and programming and the practice of journalism. In some cases, what we're starting to see in great numbers are people who are journalists who can work who have skills in computer programming, who can develop systems to automatically produce stories with, a sort of high degree of accuracy, and are increasingly starting to read more like human stories. For example, Reuters and Bloomberg already produce a lot of stories this way on business earnings. The Associated Press produces a lot of sports stories around this topic. And my sense is that this is going to increase. We are teaching classes in computational journalism that are teaching students to do sort of some low-level work on this. And the one benefit I think for journalism is that it can free up journalists to do sort of more in-depth, interesting stories, complicated stories that take more time to produce and can't be automated.
Thanks. I want to switch a little bit and talk about the future of journalism ethics. In the past, when we would have taught you all in your ethics classes, we would talk about things like protecting sources and the identities of sources, and making sure you're not conflicted out of a story and trying to stay as neutral as possible. But one thing we've noticed at the college is that increasingly our students want to become more socially and politically active and involved in their communities. I'd like to hear any thoughts, any predictions that you have about whether or not that is appropriate. And let's just assume it is. What are some other ethical issues you think, given our landscape right now, are probably going to pop up in the next 5 to 10 years? Angela, would you take a try first crack at that question?
Ethical issues. Wow. That's hard. I mean, I keep harping on social media because that's something new. A lot of news organizations have had to come up with and create social media, policies. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the ethical dilemmas we find ourselves in, a lot of it is driven, just by competition. There's so much competition. Again, just the increasing pressure to be on the record with it and to be first. But I think, a lot of journalists, because we are now covering such, powerfully moving subject matters, the push for racial justice, this racial reckoning. I live a few miles from Minneapolis, where George Floyd was killed. And so we as journalists are constantly in the middle of conflict. And so as a talk show host, it's been just challenging covering the pandemic, talking about the pandemic, talking about, racial justice issues, because before I'm a journalist, I'm a Black woman. So I can't talk about, George Floyd and not think about my Black husband, my Black son, my Black relatives, right? I can't talk about pandemic issues without, being aware of my own health concerns, or those of, people of color, or people who are disproportionately affected by COVID. And so I think one of the ethical dilemmas that journalists will face increasingly is, many of the people called to journalism are people who are, curious and, want answers to questions. But along with, all that curiosity and research that you do, you bring your own experience. And so, what is bias, and just what is you in your reporting bringing what you know best. So that's kind of where I am now in terms of ethics. As a talk show host, I have a little flexibility, because I'll just say stuff like, this is what I think, or this is what my friends say, which wouldn't fit. I mean, it's like almost like sort of maybe being an editorial writer sometimes, but like I do have experts, and I have listeners who call in and share what they think. And I'll just tell you, this is what I think too, this is what happened to me, just so that our listeners can put it into context for themselves. So I kind of see that. I mean, this push for our country to be unified, to have unity, and how do we have civil conversations? We're leading those conversations, but we're community members too, right? And you have some of these issues, many of us have really strong feelings about, and some of these, debates that we're having, it's viewed as either you're for or against us, right? There's really no middle ground. So I think that's going to be increasingly difficult for journalists, because we bring our whole selves to our jobs.
Thanks. Talia, do you have any thoughts along about future ethical dilemmas that you see?
People who are much smarter than me are grappling with these issues, so I don't think I can definitively say where this is going. But I mean, I think what Angela was saying was so important. You can't, separate who you are as a person from who you are as a reporter. And the perspectives that people of different backgrounds bring are so important to telling accurate stories that reflect what's really going on. So I hope there is a greater conversation. I know I wish I was in, Sandy or Deb's classes to be talking about it. I'm sure there's really interesting stuff going on, even over Zoom. But I think it'll definitely be an important thing for newsroom leaders, especially, to take on and make sure they're listening to the right people.
Sean, you've been somewhat involved. We've had conversations over the last couple of weeks with our orientations for CNS, and we know that social media policies for the college and our publishing arms have been, not heated, but let's just say animated. Do you have any thoughts on where you think our students are going to be leading us?
Yeah, I mean, I think Capital News Service as an organization is grappling with some of the same things Angela talked about, and many other professional news organizations are grappling with, which is the degree to which reporters should be free to. Everybody knows we have opinions, we have our own biases, but whether it's okay to express those. And the potential danger that might hold for the organization. I personally tend to come down on the side of, as reporters, we should operate from the idea that we have our opinions and object biases, and it's better for the audience to know what they are, as opposed to trying to cover them up. And what we owe our readers and our the people we cover is, sort of, I think Wes Lowry put this on Twitter the other day, the objectivity of the process, and that making sure that the process by which we produce journalism is fair, but not masking our own feelings. And I get the sense, from talking with a lot of students about this, that there seems to be a real shift between journalists kind of my generation, who were just this idea of never talk about what you believe, and the freedom with and the expectation that many of our students now have that that's just something they're going to do. So,
thanks. I'm going to take a question from one of our viewers. I think I'm for Anika. I think this is from Jillian, who's very interested in entertainment journalism. And she says that she believes it's more difficult to find opportunities in the field compared to politics and sports and where else. So Anika, where would be a good place to get started?
Sure. So I think that there are quite a few options, and I say this to a lot of folks in the sense that you know, if you're passionate about something, work to like do the work to like to share your passion. So for instance, I had a blog and I would blog about like award shows, and I would live tweet the Grammys and rank the performances from best to worst. And that was just like on my own personal time because I was interested in it, but I was practicing doing the work, writing the stories and putting out the tweets and things like that. And I do think that doing that just like kind of on your own time to like portray your passion will always help, because you have tangible examples that you can show potential employers. Like, I might not necessarily have direct experience in my previous position, but I'm very interested. These are things that I'm doing. I think trying to freelance if you can is also helpful. Again, to just have those tangible examples. And I would say if there are local opportunities, um, you know, there is always space to cover culture and art and movies, music, all of those things, wherever you're based. But also, like, just creating a network from some of those jobs you apply for, I think is important. I was so nervous when I graduated about not really having a network or feeling that I didn't have a network. But if you kind of start to cultivate that for yourself, whether that's your classmates, your professors, people who you're maybe interviewing with, or who, you might want to cold email and see if you could just do an informational call. All of that helps because people take note of what you're interested in. They take note of what your skills are. So maybe you're a really great breaking news reporter, and one day, hey, I'm hiring a breaking news reporter for entertainment. I know that you're interested in entertainment. I know that you've been trying to put in the work, at least even if it's on your personal time, as I said, like live tweeting an award show. So I think all of those things play into it. But I would honestly say that it seems like it might be harder than some of those other things like politics and sports, but I do feel like there are opportunities out there if you just kind of look around. As I said, it might be a local paper, it might be, for a digital only brand, but there are those opportunities. It's just about kind of searching for them.
I'm going to move on to a really important concept, and that's the concept of trust. One of our viewers, Cowcub Smith, asks, how do you win the trust of a divided public? And I think we're all trying to figure that out. When half of America believes that mainstream news is not to be trusted, what can the future of journalism be? Anyone want to just take a shot at that one? Something we try to work at every single day.
The elder will go.
Okay.
So I think the way you earn trust, I mean, I think of, I'm a big news consumer. I watch a lot of news, I read a lot of news, now I listen to a lot of podcasts. And I think, I look at the news organizations that I trust, and I think I trust them because they demonstrate that they bring in all kinds of voices, that they consistently mix it up, that you're going to hear, you're going to hear from older people, you're going to hear from young people, you're going to hear from, people who live in rural communities, you're going to hear from urban, communities. And so I think when you make it clear that you are receptive and you're welcoming to all voices in terms of like who your sources are, who your reporters and editors and, the people who are the faces of your organization, when your content is showing that diversity of perspectives, that something that you may, when you pick up and read something or hear something like, I didn't even know I was interested in that. I think as long as you appeal to people's curiosity and that you're still bringing, voices and ideas and things that are new to them, and you're showing it to them and from several different perspectives, I think that's what earns trust from me. And the feedback that I get from my listeners is that, like, oh, you're always mixing it up. Like, you never know what you're going to talk about, because we talk about mental health, we talk about aging. We talk about entrepreneurs and small businesses. I talk about the challenges that, schools and teachers are going through with social distancing and distance learning and mask wearing in the schools. And I do a lot on women's issues. I do entertainment. I do music. It's just, it's just a little bit of everything.
You got a great job.
I just talk and ask. So I think when you bring in lots of different perspectives from all different sides, and you're not always, serving up the same entree, then I think people will trust you, that you're open to hearing from everyone. Therefore, you produce news content that is for everyone.
Talia, do you and your colleagues talk about this at all?
Yeah, I think that's something newspapers and news organizations have to get better at, is explaining the processes behind our work. I think that there is such a lack of media literacy in the country, unfortunately. And so we have to take on that job of educating people about what goes into our work and how thoroughly we vet everything. I think the more transparent we can be, I mean, we expect that from other people, so we should hold ourselves to that same standard. Anytime I read a huge investigation that has, almost its own story at the bottom saying how we did this story, I just think of how much that's teaching people about our industry. I think there is a lot of confusion about what we do, and kind of a barrier to understanding what exactly journalism is and what exactly it takes to get into an article. So I think the more we can take it upon ourselves to tell people about what we do, the better. And just being really open about, what does it take to be an anonymous source? What does it take to have documents be referenced if they're leaked? Just really explaining what it means to get a story in the paper.
Thanks. Anika, I'm going to go to a question from Eric Morrow about social platforms and social influencers. And I'm just going to take a wild guess here that you probably deal with social influencers more routinely than the rest of us do. The question is, social platforms are increasingly designed to optimize influencer culture and news organizations, and journalists find themselves competing in the same spaces. How can reporting succeed in these spaces? And is there anything that journalists can learn from these influencers?
Absolutely. And I just wanted to piggyback off of what Talia just said about transparency. I do think that media literacy is so important in helping people understand exactly, what goes into the process of reporting and writing and publishing, and all of that I think is so important, and having people understand the differences in, different outlets, even within one outlet. The opinion section sometimes it's not super clear that an article's opinion or whatever. Things like that I think are just very important to kind of have people understand those differences. And I mean, that kind of goes into like influencers and social media. And it's something I think that is going to be a much bigger conversation in the coming years. I think a lot of journalists at this point are actually expected to kind of be a brand in and of themselves and have some sort of a personality, but then also toe the line and not be too voicey, but then, have a zillion followers so that you can help the news organization. And I think all of that is, it's good and it's bad. I think that there's something to be learned on both ends, in terms of like influencers having a huge platform and making sure that they are providing accurate and truthful information to their followers. But then also some of the, things that influencers do in terms of the creative content that they produce, social graphics and reels and TikToks and all of those things, like we're fully into that. We're fully integrating all of those things into how we share our content, because news isn't just shared in one way. People actually get a lot of their news from Twitter and TikTok, and they're not necessarily looking deep into the story. They're just trying to get the headlines and the brief, like few things that they need to know about it, and they're moving on. So I think that, I mean, it's hard to compete in that space, no joke. I mean, I look at influencers alone. There's only so many that are like so big, and look at news outlets. There are only so many that are so big. But I think that it's about putting out journalism that is, again, accurate, truthful, helpful, transparent. How did we go about doing this? If we made a mistake, own up to it. I think that that's something that's really important right now is saying, hey, you know what, we're human too. And sometimes we make mistakes. And sometimes, you know, we had 5 people look at this and we've still missed whatever, you know, issue was there. And we're just trying our best. And, you know, we're not perfect. And we want to make sure that, you know, that comes across, and but that we're trying and we're striving for perfection and striving for truth and striving for, you know, getting out the news in the best kind of way.
And by the way, I think it's Katie is reminding me that this is International or National News Literacy Week. So you should all dial into the News Literacy Project and give those folks a contribution so we can train our readers and viewers and listeners. You know, there is a lot of chatter in our Q&A about objectivity and opinion and there's a lot of concern, obviously, about where we're going, and some interesting questions along that. Andre Roa asks, as working journalists, do you find value in consuming news from what is described in this question as a fringe or a non-trustworthy source, such as Newsmax or OANN as part of our work? I mean, do any of you follow those sources?
I'll just chime in here. I do find value in looking at them because there are so many people in this country who do subscribe to them as, you know, valid news accounts, despite the lack of what I would say is you know, a true fact-based journalistic approach to covering the news. But I do think it's useful as journalists to know what sources people are consuming. I mean, frankly, it would have been hard to understand the Trump administration without occasionally looking at Fox or occasionally going to like OANN's website, even if I don't actually believe what's there.
Anyone else want to take a shot at that question? No? So a couple of folks have asked variations of the same question. And let's start out by asking each one of you, if you had one piece of advice to ask one of our incoming freshmen next fall about how to pursue a journalism career, what would that one piece of advice be? Talia, do you want to start?
Sure. So something that I wish that I had done more, you know, in my first couple of years in journalism school is realizing that being a student journalist gets you like a fair pass to email any working journalist and they're going to help you. Like one time, me and my friend were working on a story for the Diamondback about how there are a bunch of umd.edu emails in the Ashley Madison data dump, if you remember when that happened. And we were going through and typing in a bunch of people's names, and like it was taking a long time. And we realized we need to get onto the dark web. And we didn't know how to get onto the dark web. So we reached out to someone, I think it was at Reuters, and asked them for help with that. And they just instantly hooked us up. I think it wrecked my computer. It couldn't handle that much data, but we did write the story. And so I think that just, you know, making use of the fact that people are going to want to help you out because they've just gone through the experience you're going through. So I would just not be afraid to ask people for advice and for help, and just go for it.
Angela, how about you?
I'm thinking about myself as a freshman. I think the best thing that a college freshman or someone new to journalism or who wants to be in journalism can do is again being a consumer of news. You need to know what is happening in your community. You need to know what's happening in local and state government, what's happening, what are the national news issues. You need to be reading 1, 2, 5 newspapers a day, several times a day. You need to be watching, you know, pick a broadcast news source. You should be watching TV news. You should be listening to public radio, because I don't have much patience for, you know, students who are aspiring journalists that if I talk to you, you can't tell me, you can't have a conversation with me about what's happening in news. So I think if you're serious about being a journalist, then you need to be serious about having an understanding of what is happening, what makes news, right? So you're not going to be able to report the news if you can't identify what news is. And so I think, I mean, that doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't require anybody returning your email. You know, it's like read a paper. And I say this too after working with young journalists, people who have gotten into their first jobs, who've made the breakthrough, who still are not informed about the communities that they're supposed to be covering. I find it maddening and insulting. So if you want to be a journalist, then you need to be reading and consuming news.
Thanks. Anika, how about you?
I think kind of piggybacking off of both what Angela and Talia said, being an avid consumer of news, and just a reader in general, a reader of books, you get to learn language better. You know, can write things in a clearer way. So I think just reading in general is really, really important. It also helps you, you know, figure out like who's in the industry. And I think that creating a network for yourself, whether that's, as I said before, cold emailing people whose work you really love and whose careers you kind of want to emulate, or, you know, looking at the work that your professors have done over the years or that previous alum have done. I think all of that makes a huge difference. It shows you what's possible for you. I know at times it's like very scary as a freshman to think of yourself post-grad and to think that you could actually like have a job doing all of this, and you have to talk to strangers and go cover things and pick up the phone, and all of that is certainly very nerve-wracking. But I think all of that kind of shows that you can do it. There are people who have done it, and those people are absolutely willing to help you if you're putting in the work, if you're reading the news, if you're positioning yourself to just try your best to like have your preparation meet the opportunity when it's ready for you.
Sean, besides telling a freshman that they should take your class, what's your general advice to the freshmen when they come in the door?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to a lot of freshmen about this, and the number one point I tell them is take this opportunity now that you're in school to do as much journalism as possible. Your classes are great; they will make you a better journalist. But actually having experience, whether that's working for the Diamondback, whether that's writing for Capital News Service, whether that's doing internships at your local paper, that's the thing that's going to get you better, because the stakes are real and it matters. And what ultimately will get you a job.
Raymond Flanders asks the question, what's the future of diversity in journalism? Are newsrooms doing a better job of elevating stories from communities that haven't been covered well? Are we doing a better job of hiring people from those communities? What do you think the future looks like? I'm going to go to Angela first on that, because I know you've been heavily involved over the years in NABJ and a lot of the organizations that have been working on this issue.
Yeah, it deeply saddens me. When I started working in television in 1990, there were very few people of color, you know, in front of the camera, and it's still that way today. And a lot of it is, you know, it's who is in management and who are the hiring managers, and still overwhelmingly they're white men who are going to the same sources to help make hires, right? And so the networking in journalism is very critical. And, you know, I've seen it throughout my entire career, beginning with internship opportunities. What colleges do we recruit from? Where the colleges where our managers went to school? Where do we, you know, when we have opportunities for promotion, who do we hire or promote? We promote the people who are our neighbors or friends, or, you know, who we have social ties to. So diversity, that's a very painful question for me, because I'm very discouraged by it. I'm very upset by it. It's in terms of, you know, retaining and recruiting journalists of color. Television stations have done a horrible job. Newspapers have done a horrible job. Public radio has done a horrible job. To our future journalists, Google journalists of color, racial reckoning, newsrooms, see what you find, see what comes up. The story right now that's happening in television, the LA Times investigation on what's happening at CBS News, senior executives making horrible racist and sexist statements about people who work for them. And so I'm very distressed by it. And, you know, it affects your product. I mean, you're not going to be able to tell compelling stories, accurate stories about your communities if you don't have, people in your newsroom at the table where decisions are made, pitching ideas, approving ideas, creating teams, and, enabling projects to take place that tell the stories of your communities when everyone at the table looks the same. And so that's a painful question for me because I'm very discouraged by it, and it makes me very sad.
I'm going to try to get through as many of these questions as I can in the time that we have allotted, which isn't much more. But Talia, I'm going to ask you to answer this because I know that you have, it has to do with the decline of small print outlets in the DC metro area. When you were at the Sun, you worked very closely with Annapolis and Carroll County. And I know you have many friends and classmates who are working for some of those publications, saying with the closure of the Gazette newspapers in Prince George's and Montgomery counties, what opportunities are available for students to get clips published for classes or secure internships or find jobs? What are your classmates and other recent graduates, what are they doing?
Yeah, that's definitely difficult. The fact that there are just so many fewer places to go. But I think there are, I think Anika was talking about this earlier, just looking for even online only publications where you can freelance and pitch ideas, then you don't have to be as confined to one market. I think, going for it with places that, maybe you haven't been hired or they passed you up for an internship. If you have a great story idea, they don't have enough reporters right now, unless they're, the New York Times or the Washington Post. And they will want, I think, a good angle and a good story if you can bring that to them. So I don't have much experience with freelancing, but I think that would be worth a shot. I think the New York Times style section editor had a really great Twitter thread about how to pitch compelling stories as a freelancer. So I can try and find that and send that along.
Anika, you work for the Gannett Company, which has a network of community newspapers all over America. How does, what can you tell us, if anything, about how getting into one of those news organizations works? Do you have any tips for that?
Sure. So I think, of course, the news industry as a whole has experienced some major losses in terms of resources and being able to hire and all of those kinds of things. But I do still think that local papers are looking to hire people who know the community. So getting to know where you are, if you're going to move somewhere, showing that you're willing to put in the work and that you kind of know what you're talking about. So again, what you might lack for in one sense, you make up for in another sense. So if it's your, really great interviewing skills or whatever it may be, that you can combine with learning kind of on the job about the community and really going out there and pounding the pavement, or doing so virtually at this point. But I think with the great thing, at least about Gannett, is that our local papers, USA Today, will pick up their content. And so you might think you're starting at this really small place and maybe you're not really getting the stories that you want. But I think also, as we've seen recently, news can happen anywhere, and it is happening anywhere, and it's changing things in a major way. Darcy Castello, who was one of my classmates, who is an amazing, amazing journalist, she works in Louisville at our paper there, and her reporting on the Breonna Taylor shooting and the aftermath and everything that has happened there, honestly, has been phenomenal. And I'm sure a lot of people thought, like, Louisville, like, okay, that's, certainly not, like the DC area or whatever, but she has broken news. Her and her colleagues there have really created amazing stories and given context and shown what, like, the power of a local paper can do. And so those opportunities, if you can get in the door there, they will really help you as a journalist and help, showcase your work.
Okay, Sean, I'm going to give you a sort of a freebie because I know you know how to answer this one, from Tanvir. Does coding enhance your performance as a student or an employee?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, there are lots of ways journalists gather information and tell stories. And for people who can use programming skills to analyze data to find information, or use coding and programming skills to build compelling web presentations, those are pretty hot hiring areas for news organizations now. And certainly those are most of the students I work with. So I'd be happy to talk to you more about that.
Okay. Well, I think we have one more time for one more question. And I am going to go to Anonymous, who asks, according to you guys, which type of journalism will flourish in the future? Broadcast, investigative, sports, culture, entertainment, fantasy football, who knows? Talia, what's your prediction?
Well, I certainly hope all of it. And I think that there's definitely an appetite for, strong investigative reporting that I expect and I'm excited to see continue. Something that I think we'll see more in the future, not a specific type of journalism, but more of the community funded model of newsrooms and funding positions. So I work for the Dallas Morning News Education Lab, which is a specific section of the paper devoted only to education coverage, and that's funded through donors and in the community, obviously with a line between the funders and the coverage. But I think that kind of model is expanding, and hope a lot of them are more dedicated to specific subjects. So I think we could see more of that in the future, which is exciting.
I think you're right about that. Angela, how about you?
I don't know. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of mergers in the future. And I don't know. I hope people will continue to turn the radios on. I was not a big public radio fan most of my career, but the last 2 years since I transitioned into public radio, I just love it. Because, the written word is very powerful and can be very descriptive. Video is amazing. An image can tell you so much. But I found that audio and radio reporting is very intimate. And so I've become a big fan of it. So I don't know who will be the survivor.
Well, I think radio is going to come out really well, because as a commuter, and in ordinary times, I spend a lot of time on the Beltway, and I couldn't live without live radio.
We rely on donations. We're funded, like more than half of our budget comes from donors. So with the economic troubles that we're seeing, I mean, we're all kind of struggling.
Yeah. Anika, how about you?
I don't, if I had a magic ball, I wish I did. As Talia said, I kind of hope all things are still, a big deal, but I would say kind of the explainer model. I mean, I think journalism is always about explaining in some ways, but social graphics that kind of break issues down very clearly have become so popular. And I think that translates also to just like on platform, content stories that break things down very clearly, like what does this mean? Here's the answer. And then what does that mean? Here's the answer. Videos that do that as well. TikToks that are kind of like, well, what's actually happening in the Capitol right now? Or, what does Joe Biden's inauguration mean for my student loans? And very clearly giving the answer and explaining it succinctly. I think that those kinds of things are going to kind of be the future, and we're already heading in that direction.
Sean, how about you?
Yeah, I'd say, regardless of topic, I think there will continue to be journalism about every single topic possible. But the journalism that will be successful is journalism that meets specific needs of the audience, just like Anika was saying. So yeah,
Meets the needs. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, and our audience as well. This was a lot of fun. It's nice to see your faces. I wish we could all be together, but one of the beauties of COVID world is we've had more alumni engagement than we've ever had before, because this is a really great way for us to catch up with each other. So anyone who has questions, Merrill has a new website. It's merrill.umd.edu. So go look us up and be sure to encourage friends, relatives, brothers, sisters, neighbors, everybody. You know, Merrill College is an outstanding school. If you know an outstanding young aspiring journalist, send them to us, okay? All right, turning it over to you, Katie.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. I think with the number of questions that were submitted, I think we probably could have gone for another 20 or 30 minutes with that conversation. I just want to draw people's attention to the chat. We've got several of our panelists have listed their contact information there, as well as a couple of our alumni who were listening in. For students or recent graduates who might be listening or watching, you know, definitely take them up on their offers of connecting. I know from working with so many of them, they're always very happy to help and talk with you and connect you. Just again, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And I encourage you to take a look at what else the Alumni Association has going on for Career Week this week. And we hope to see you at another event sometime soon. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.